What if I told you there once lived a king so physically tormented, so genetically broken, that even his most loyal subjects believed he was cursed by the devil himself? This is the story of Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg monarch, a man so disfigured, so mentally shattered, that his very existence felt like an insult to nature. His people called him El Hechizado, the bewitched one. But Charles wasn't cursed by demons. He was cursed by something far more real, his own bloodline. This is the tragic, horrifying downfall of Europe's most powerful dynasty, a royal family that twisted itself into oblivion and left behind a king whose autopsy would become one of the most disturbing in history. Buckle up, because this is the story that history textbooks are too afraid to tell. 1. The jaw that shouldn't exist. When foreign dignitaries first laid eyes on King Charles II, they were horrified. The monarch of the mighty Spanish Empire couldn't even close his own mouth. His jaw jutted forward so dramatically that his teeth didn't align. His lips hung permanently open, exposing a grotesque gap large enough to slide a coin through. This wasn't just a birth defect, it was the culmination of 200 years of intermarriage. Because in the House of Habsburg, marrying a cousin or even a niece wasn't taboo, it was policy. Charles's parents, uncle and niece. His grandparents, also uncle and niece. His family tree wasn't branching, it was circling the drain. The result? A genetic time bomb known today as mandibular prognathism, or, more famously, the Habsburg jaw. Eating for Charles was a nightmare. Palace kitchens had to puree every meal into baby mush. Even then, soups would leak from the corners of his mouth. Solid food fell out. His dinners, meant to project imperial majesty, became macabre spectacles. Servants constantly wiped drool from the king's chin as he tried to swallow. But the deformity didn't just affect his mouth, it warped his voice. His speech was slurred, wet, and nearly incomprehensible. Foreign diplomats needed interpreters, not for language, but for clarity. Queen Mariana, his own mother, once confessed she feared her son might choke to death on his own tongue in his sleep. And yet, the Habsburgs kept marrying each other, over and over, because to them, preserving pure royal blood mattered more than health or sanity. 2. A body that shouldn't function. The jaw was just the beginning. Charles II's entire body was a battlefield of genetic misfires. At 35 years old, he looked like a fragile, sickly child who'd been stretched and twisted by an unseen hand. He stood barely 5 feet tall. His limbs were thin, frail, almost skeletal. His torso was hunched and compressed. His head, disproportionately large, bobbed on a neck too weak to support it properly. He didn't learn to walk until age 8. Let that sink in. Most children walk before their first birthday. Charles needed 8 years just to stumble. Even then, walking was a challenge. He shuffled from wall to wall, clinging to furniture like a man twice his age. His spine curved unnaturally. His back was so hunched that he looked perpetually weighed down not just by illness, but by centuries of dynastic sin. Mentally, Charles was equally stunted. He couldn't read until age 10, and even then, court tutors described teaching him as trying to pour water into a broken vessel. He forgot almost everything he was taught. His emotional outbursts were infamous, violent tantrums over minor inconveniences, screaming fits. He would collapse into eerie silence, staring blankly for hours, lost in a fog no one could penetrate. Even his hair betrayed his condition, patchy, thin, and falling out. His scalp looked diseased, like something you'd find on a wounded animal. Royal painters tried to flatter him in portraits, but the damage couldn't be fully hidden. The world knew Charles wasn't just unwell, he was disintegrating in plain sight. 3. Rumors of witchcraft. Charles II had one job as king: produce an heir. He failed spectacularly. His first wife, Marie-Louise of Orleans, was a radiant French princess, but her wedding night ended in disaster. Rumors whispered that Charles didn't understand what he was supposed to do. He was confused, distressed. Medical records suggest his reproductive organs were so underdeveloped they resembled those of a child. The court, desperate to deflect blame, accused Marie-Louise of being infertile. She was subjected to humiliating fertility treatments, potions, bleeding rituals, invasive exams. She was fed toxic herbs and prayers. Her health crumbled under the strain. She died mysteriously at 26. The king remarried quickly, this time to Maria Anna of Neuburg, but nothing changed. She wrote letters describing her horror at Charles's appearance and the impossibility of intimacy. The court brought in doctors, healers, even alchemists. They examined the king like a failed science experiment, measured him, poked him, fed him bizarre elixirs. Nothing worked, because the problem wasn't spiritual or medical. It was biological. He was a broken machine, held together by royal titles and wishful thinking. Meanwhile, Europe held its breath. Everyone knew the truth. When Charles died without an heir, the Spanish throne would be up for grabs, and the continent would bleed for it. 4. The wives who feared him. When medicine failed, the Spanish court turned to the church. They believed Charles was possessed, so they called in exorcists, not in secret, but in public, inside the royal palace. Imagine it. Nobles and dignitaries watching as priests screamed Latin incantations over their king, who writhed on the floor, vomiting holy water and moaning in agony. Father Froilan Diaz, the court's chief exorcist, declared Charles housed 47 demons, each one responsible for a different affliction. They claimed one spirit twisted his spine, another ruined his speech, one corrupted his seed. These cleansings were horrifying. Priests forced Charles to drink holy water mixed with powdered saint bones. He'd gag, vomit, sometimes pass out. They pressed crucifixes to his skin until he screamed, splashed him with water, forced him to speak prayers he couldn't understand. At one point, the palace underwent a full spiritual purge. Furniture, heirlooms, clothing, all burned in the courtyard as monks chanted spells to banish evil. The irony? Charles believed it was helping. For a while, his symptoms eased, so he begged for more exorcisms. The palace turned into a medieval horror show. But the demons weren't inside Charles. They were inside the system that made him. 6. The autopsy that shocked Europe. Charles II died on November 1, 1700. He was just 38 years old. What doctors discovered during his autopsy shocked even the most hardened physicians. His heart? The size of a walnut. His lungs, gangrenous, filled with pus and rotting flesh. His intestines, putrid, blackened, decaying from the inside. His brain, surrounded by fluid, spongy, discolored. Signs of hydrocephalus, a condition known to cause seizures and cognitive impairment. His genitals, deformed, underdeveloped, functionally useless. The royal physician, Dr. Jerónimo de la Fuente, wrote, "It is a miracle this body sustained life for so long, for it contained not a single healthy organ." The report was so disturbing, the Spanish court tried to suppress it, but the truth leaked, and Europe was horrified. Not only had their most powerful monarch lived in torment, he had reigned while rotting alive. The man they thought was bewitched wasn't cursed by demons. He was cursed by the Habsburg legacy, a dynasty that valued power over people and purity over humanity. 6. The end of a dynasty. Charles died childless. As predicted, Europe erupted. The War of Spanish Succession, a brutal 10-year-long conflict that killed hundreds of thousands, was sparked by his death. The very bloodline that tried to concentrate power through incest ultimately destroyed the empire it sought to preserve. The Habsburg obsession with control didn't protect them, it doomed them. Charles II wasn't just the last Habsburg king of Spain. He was a living monument to the dangers of unchecked power, a genetic tragedy wearing a crown. The story of Charles II is a chilling reminder that the pursuit of power, without restraint, without humanity, can destroy not just empires, but the very people meant to rule them. If stories like this fascinate you, if you want to dive deeper into the darkest corners of history, subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Tell us, which cursed dynasty or tragic figure should we expose next? Because in history, the real horror is often hiding in plain sight.